This episode of the Big Seance podcast is sponsored by Nuwati Herbals, herbal remedies from Mother Earth. Visit nuwatiherbals.com and use code Big Seance, all one word, to receive 15% off your Nuwati Herbals order as a thank you. Again, that's nuwatiherbals.com, and Nuwati is Nuwati. So what tea will your host be pouring today? Find out a little later. And here's what's coming up in episode 147, Barb Huyser.
Back in 1977, there were four of us really who were the primaries in our graduate school investigation team. My team's approach has always been, from the very beginning, to see what we could do to help the ghost make a different choice than the one that they made at the time that they died and move on to the other side. We call it crossover work, and our approach to it we call paranormal social work. And then I stood there and I said, Rhoda, I'm 50 years old. We're about the same age. You died when you were about 50 years old. What have you done in the last 100 years? And I feel like this is the case that brought me here. And it took over 30 years to do it. This is why long-term investigating is so important.
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Barb Huyser has been on the show a few times before, but they've just been quick, fleeting moments as I run into her every year at the Haunted America conference. Well, having her on a full episode was long overdue. And let me tell you, you're about to receive a gift. Barb is a storyteller, and I assured her that I would let her take us wherever she wanted. And I couldn't wait to just sit back and enjoy all of it. And that's what we did. There are about 3 stories that you're going to hear. The first one fills up the majority of the episode, and it is quite possibly the best story I've heard here at the Big Seance. So make sure to stay with it. It's a longer episode, but splitting this one up into 2 episodes just didn't feel right. So feel free to pause as you need to while going about your day. But I'm glad you're here. Let's pour our tea. Today, I'm drinking Eye of the Hawk tea. And I think I'm going to drink some right now. I promise you I'm drinking it. I got my spoon. Give it a little stir. I don't know, is that weird to drink something right on the air? But let me tell you why I'm drinking Eye of the Hawk tea. First, I have gone through some eyeglasses drama in the last month. My eyes are horrible, and I've worn glasses since I was a kid. And, well, I moved to progressive lenses recently, and I tried really hard, but it was a nightmare. And often it's a nightmare every time I get a new prescription because my eyes continuously change. But a long story short, with these progressives, I recently just went back to my eye doc and said, you can have these back. Thanks so much. And so I'm wearing my old prescriptions because I can see. Not perfectly, but I can at least see. Well, this tea, Eye of the Hawk, is good for tired, strained eyes. And so I'm going to give it a try. It's supposed to enhance your vision. Here's the other reason I'm drinking Eye of the Hawk tonight. You're going to hear later that Barb's spirit guide is named hawk. So there's some more synchronicity for us, Barb. Eye of the hawk contains bilberries, eyebright, ginkgo, periwinkle, lemon peel, and more. So help me thank Nuwati Herbals for sponsoring the show by visiting nuwatiherbals.com and ordering some tea. And don't forget, you can get 15% off your order if you use the code Big Seance, all one word. Thanks, Nuwati Herbals. Barb Huyser has investigated the paranormal since she was in college in 1977. She now lives in Monmouth, Illinois, and she is the founder and lead investigator of the Small Town Ghosts team. Barb is also the author of Small Town Ghosts, which is a book that tells about her personal experiences with ghosts and hauntings using science, sensitives, and a therapeutic approach. Huyser and her team have helped ghosts to move on to the other side. In Small Town Ghosts, the reader will learn about the Native Americans haunting a rural cemetery, a ghost who regularly tucked the lady of the house into bed, which is interesting, and participate in a birthday party for the ghost of a little girl who died in the 1960s. Huyser offers theories of why hauntings occur, the science of investigating them, and creative new approaches to resolving hauntings. As Troy Taylor has always said, Barb Huyser is the only person who has attended every Haunted America conference since like 1996 or something like that. And I think she's very proud of that. I would totally rock that with pride. Welcome to the Parlor, Barb.
I'm delighted to be here. It's a very comfortable parlor to be in.
Well, you've been known to talk about this idea of paranormal social work, which I am finding fascinating. And you even led a workshop on the topic this last summer at the Haunted America conference, which I unfortunately, I missed your workshop. So I wanted to ask, how did that go?
It went very well. Hopefully the people who participated learned a few things and have some tools that they could take with them that will help them to work with families who are dealing with a haunting situation so that the haunting can be resolved. One of the things that I think is missing from a lot of the teams is that part of the work. We call it crossover work, and our approach to it we call paranormal social work. I tend to differentiate between the kinds of teams that we have these days. I go back to 1977. At that time, paranormal investigating consisted of a few celebrity investigators, such as Hans Holzer, that crowd, and very little in the way of technology, a lot of psychics who would walk into a place and say what was going on, and maybe they would get some photographs, but that was about it. And so when I was in graduate school, there were a number of us in the psychology department who had an interest in the paranormal. And so we decided to form a team and go out and investigate some of the places that were local in that region and see what we could find. For me, all it took was one place where there was paranormal activity that I experienced to hook me on this as a vocation for life. Of course, I did have to make a living, which meant that, especially in those days, you could not do that off the paranormal. And so I worked in the field of vocational rehabilitation, where I recently retired after 40 years of running programs for people with disabilities.
Congratulations.
It's nice to be retired, I have to say that. One of the things that working in a helping profession gave me an attitude of, we're there to help. This is not just about us going in and getting some evidence and, thanking the family, congratulations, you've got a ghost, and we can prove it. We've found this EVP and we've got this photograph, and please notice this chart where it shows all of the cold spots in your house and where activity is at. The problem with that is it doesn't solve the issue for the family. Usually, if I get a phone call asking for an investigation, it's not because Grandma showed up at the end of the bed and she waved hi and disappeared. It's because a stranger showed up at the end of the bed. And things are happening around the house like object movement, and it shows up in the kids' bedroom and scares them. Families don't necessarily want to be living with a ghost. And it's not a natural thing for us to have a ghost in our homes. None of us know for sure what's waiting for us on the other side, but I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to hang around here. We're supposed to move on. And so my team's approach has always been, from the very beginning, to see what we could do to help the ghost make a different choice than the one that they made at the time that they died and move on to the other side.
Now, is crossing over and moving a spirit on, is that something that's like an automatic response, or is it case by case, kind of like an individual spirit and their personality, what's in their best interest or what might be holding them back? Do you look at it case by case?
It's highly individualized. I've been doing this for almost 45 years now. And when we do it, every single case is different because human personality is different. Human beings are very unique in their motivations. Every person has different reasons for why they do certain things and why they made particular decisions in their lives. And because those things are different for every human being, the way that we have to approach a crossover can be completely different from one to the next. I've never had any two that were alike, though the techniques can be similar from one to the other. For example, it's very rare that a single visit will do it. Only once in all of the times that I've been doing this did I accomplish a crossover in one visit. Usually, when I'm doing an investigation, I get the call, I screen over the phone, and if it sounds reasonable, I will go out and make a first visit. Now, when I was in the Chicago area, it would be me and another person. We'd take two. Out here in rural Illinois, where things are a bit calmer, more tranquil, usually I do it by myself. And so this was at a house located outside of Galesburg, Illinois, actually. It was a farmhouse that had been flipped. It had been purchased, revamped on the inside, a lot of changes, a lot of fixing it up, and then it was sold to a newly married couple. Well, the paranormal activity in that house literally started the night they moved in. They had such things happening as a stack of dishes that had been put inside a cabinet. In the morning, they came out and found that stack sitting on the counter. Objects were being moved. They were hearing noises around the house. But one of the most interesting things that happened was the husband really got tired of having, the bedroom door opening and closing by itself. And so one night he put his heavy work boots in front of the door to prop it open. Well, the next morning they got up and the door was closed and the work boots were halfway down the hall. So this was a time when the wife was about to declare quits on this house. So they had heard about me, and I got a call, and I went out. I am not a psychic. I don't pick up on the kinds of things that some of the people that I've worked with over the years can pick up on. But I do tend to get a sense of, yeah, there is something going on here, or no, there's nothing going on here that I can pick up on. In this particular house, I had a feeling there was something going on, and not only that, but as I was walking through the house and taking photos and, doing a sweep with the EMF detector, that we were being followed. And the husband and wife had a theory about who the ghost might be. Apparently, the owner of the farm in the 1950s, who of course lived in that farmhouse, he died in a tractor accident in the 50s and was killed. And they thought it was him. So it's like, okay, I'll take a chance. And so I just said out loud, do you realize that you died? Do you understand that when you had the accident with the tractor, that you were killed? You don't have to stay here anymore. Your wife is waiting for you. Your parents are waiting for you. Everybody you have ever loved that got there first, they're waiting for you to come join them. And so I went on and finished and made plans for the next week. I was going to bring out the whole team, and we were going to do a thorough sweep for evidence in the house. And so we returned the next week, found nothing. All of the stuff that I had found the week before in terms of unusual EMF or whatever, none of that was there. And the wife reported that activity had stopped. Absolutely nothing. And so I think that is the one time that just telling someone that they were dead, in my experience, accomplished a crossover right on the spot. I suspect that for all those years, this guy was just, he saw crops being planted, he saw crops growing, he saw them being harvested. He just thought that he was doing it when actually he wasn't. And so once he understood he was dead, he moved on.
That's awesome. When I hear you tell these stories and hear how you respond to these stories, I wish that I had your knowledge and experience when I was doing more of this stuff. I only did it for 4 or 5 years. And toward the end, I also went out on my own, and I insisted on only doing this if I was helping people. Like I still sometimes have issues going out and investigating things more just for the fun of it. And there were the last couple investigations I did, or it actually might be the last investigation I did, was in a really tough situation. And I did screening too, like I think most people probably do. And I knew it was going to be a different situation for me. It was in a small, tiny little trailer with a single mother and I think 3 kids, and a lot of death in a small amount of time in their family. And I got there and I could very quickly tell that there was alcoholism involved in the picture, and probably some different, mental things going on, and some true trauma, going on in the mother and in this family. And I was really good with asking myself constantly this whole way through, this is a little over your head. You have to make sure they know that you cannot be the savior here. And I did the best I could, and I referred out, and I wish I would have known you then. And I just, after that, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I am not the kind of person that can comfortably, I'm kind of reclusive, not a huge social person. And I was like, I think I'm done. That's not me.
Yeah.
But that sounds to me like that's the kind of thing that you're really good at.
Well, I'm introverted. I'm an introvert. More of my life goes on inside my head than outside of my head. And my fascination with ghosts and hauntings has always been there. Even when I was a kid, I'd never lived in a house that was haunted. My father worked in sales, and we got moved all over the Midwest, and I'll bet we moved 10 times before I was an adult. And never in any of the houses that we lived in did I encounter anything paranormal. But the fascination was always there. And so I'm just a helper. I'm fascinated with this, but I want to help too. I want to make things better. And that has stayed behind a lot of the motivation that I've had to do this. Part of it is that very first investigation in 1977 where we encountered paranormal activity. This is kind of a long story. This may take some time to go over because it started in 1977 in April and really did not wind up until 2012 in June.
Wow.
Yeah, this is probably the single most important investigation I was ever a part of.
Let's hear it. Go for it.
Back in 77, when we formed our team, there were 4 of us really who were the primaries, in our graduate school investigation team. There was Joe, who is a sensitive. There was John, who was a Vietnam vet who was attending graduate school on the GI Bill. He had served over in Vietnam doing mostly intelligence work. And there was myself and then a nursing student by the name of Wanda. And Joe was acquainted with one of the psychology instructors out at McKendree College in Lebanon, Illinois. And this instructor had been doing some investigating at an abandoned house outside of Lebanon, which was referred to as Rhoda's house. And so Joe wrangled an invitation from that instructor, and she took us out to the house where we knew nothing about the house, did not know it was known as Rhoda's house. We went in cold. Now, back in 77, there was no equipment. We knew about electronic voice phenomenon because Konstantin Raudive's book had been translated from the German. And so we'd all read that, and we all had tape recorders. Even graduate students could have tape recorders back then. Of course, they were big honking things compared to what we use now. But we had no other equipment. None of us owned a camera, let alone being able to afford film and developing and all of that. But what we did was Joe and I went through the house separately. We were never in the same room at the same time, and we wrote notes about anything that we experienced or felt. And then when we were done, we stood outside of the house and we compared notes with the instructor from McKendree College. Now, this house was built in the mid-1800s. You could tell that it had at one time been a beautiful place, a show place. There were 4 rooms on the first floor, 4 rooms on the second floor with the exact same plan on each floor. There were 2 rooms on each side and a wide hallway in the middle, and then there was a staircase at the end of the hallway that went up to a landing and then curved around and went up to the second floor. On the second floor, in a room that was at the northeast corner of the house, there was a very narrow staircase that went down to the room below it. The house was in terrible shape. There were rotten spots in the floors, where the wood was gone. You could tell there had once been windows and doors and things like that, but those were gone. It had been stripped and vandalized. The house was in very poor condition. Anyway, when Joe and I came out of the house, we compared notes. And one of the things that she wrote down on her notes was the name Rhoda. Not knowing anything about the house, she picked up on a name Rhoda. I wrote down the name Sarah. Again, I didn't know anything about the house. And we both commented that that one northeast room, those stairs felt dangerous, like someone would like to shove you down those stairs. Well, that was when the instructor from McHenry College started telling us the story about the house. The original owners of the house, the people who built it, were John and Rhoda Galbraith. Yeah, so she nailed Rhoda. And the local story was that they had a couple of daughters, and one of them got into a disagreement with her mother, but fell down the stairs and died.
Wow.
Now, it was not known the exact circumstances of the fall down the stairs, just that apparently that was how she died. And so it's like, oh, wow, we've nailed this one. We've got something going here. We were as excited as 22-year-olds can be. And so we had it set up where we had gone out the first time on a Thursday. We had it set up that we would go back on Saturday. On the way out, the instructor took us out to where the family cemetery was, which was across a cornfield in a copse of woods. And so we walked around the family cemetery. We found Rhoda's grave marker. You know, she had what was at one time a beautifully carved limestone gravestone. But like a lot of things that are almost 100 years old, it was pretty worn from the weather. The cemetery was obviously abandoned. Nobody had been buried there in many, many years. It was completely grown over, uncared for, just really a mess. So anyway, we had determined that we would be coming back on Saturday, which we did. This time we had the four of us together. There was John, who was truly our tech guy. He came to this with a reel-to-reel tape recorder, high-gain microphone, operated off a portable battery. And he kind of hinted that it might be like unofficially relocated government property that he was using. So what we were going to do was we wanted to go out to the family cemetery first because it was getting dark. Because it was so overgrown, we wanted to get out there while it was still light for safety. And so we got out there. John setting the tape recorder on the ground, but he dangled the microphone over a tree limb. And he was wearing headphones so that he could hear what was going into the tape. And so we were there with our flashlights, and we were talking among ourselves. And it was getting to be dusk, so we invited anything that might be out there that would want to communicate with us to go ahead and do that, and that we would be able to hear it by playing back this tape recorder. Well, we were there for a while and heard a rustling off in the woods, and it startled us. We turned our flashlights in that direction and saw that it was a little red fox. It was coming towards us, but as soon as it realized we were there, it turned, scampered back off into the woods. And so we talked nervously among ourselves because it startled us, and then extended the invitation again for anything that was out there that wanted to communicate with us to please do so. And so we quieted down, and a couple minutes later, John said, "We're getting the hell out of here." Well, when the guy who's Ben Denam says, "We're getting the hell out of there," you get the hell out of there.
Right.
So we packed up our stuff, we walked out of the woods, went back to the cars, and John put the recorder on the car and played back what he heard going into that recorder. You could tell the effectiveness of this high-gain microphone that he had because it was picking up natural sounds that we did not hear, like dogs barking in the distance. This house was located off a gravel road, off a third gravel road, out in rural the rural area near Lebanon, Illinois. We were in the middle of nowhere. There were no houses in sight other than the abandoned one. It was all farmland that we were surrounded with. And so I don't know how far away the nearest farmhouse was, but it was a good enough distance that we didn't hear those dogs bark. So we hear the sounds of ourselves talking, and we heard the rustling off in the woods, and I hear Wanda's voice saying, "Oh, look, it's a red fox." And then it turns around, scampers off. We extend our invitation again, and we are standing there quietly, and you heard a sound that we did not hear. It was a sound like a big burst of wind came through. It was like all of a sudden all of the leaves were rustling. The general noise level went up. And over that, you could hear what sounded like the voice of a woman screaming, "Help me."
Wow.
Yeah. This was truly quite amazing to all of us. Scared the daylights out of us, but it also impressed us. It's like we really have something here. And so we packed up our gear and got back in our cars and headed towards where the house was. And the closer we got to the house, I don't know if we were scaring ourselves or if we were picking up on something coming from the house. But it's like, that house doesn't feel safe tonight. I'm not going in that house. Nobody's going in that house. We'll stand out here and we'll record here. Well, we did that for a while. We didn't get anything, so we packed up and left. We came back a couple days later. I'm thinking it might have been Monday or Tuesday. And in the time that we had not been there, someone had gone in to that one upstairs room where the stairs were and painted occult symbols on the wall. So, according to the instructor out at McKendree, the house was being used for rituals of various sorts, along with the cemetery. And so we think that someone had gone out, or a group of someones, and got everything stirred up. It just felt very dangerous to be at the house that night. We continued to go back to the house repeatedly. We were looking for evidence. We would have equipment that would work when we were outside the house. As soon as you stepped inside, it would stop working, or it would work inside the house, but as soon as you stepped into that back room, that upstairs back room, it would stop working. Flashlights, tape recorders, whatever you had, it wouldn't necessarily work. And so we were fascinated. We tried to find more information about the family, but given that we were also going to graduate school at the time, there wasn't as much time to do that as we had hoped. Now, during the 70s, I'm going to digress a little bit. There were drugs around. There was marijuana around. We didn't do that stuff because in those days, if you did it and you got caught, your career was over. And we were all heavily invested in, we're going to graduate school for the purpose of having a career. And so we didn't mess with that stuff. It didn't mean we didn't do weird stuff, though. If you go to graduate school in psychology, at some point you will mess around with hypnosis. You will do that. And so we messed around with hypnosis. And so Joe and I, one afternoon, we were at the college in one of the study rooms, and we decided to just experiment with some hypnosis. And so I hypnotized her, got her into trance, and then she, while in trance, hypnotized me. And then I hypnotized her back to take her deeper in trance, and she took me deeper in trance. And so we were seeing how far we could take this. And all of a sudden, I'm getting flashes of the house. And I told Joe, I want to describe what I see. And so in this trance, I'm walking towards the house. And the front of the house looked exactly the way that it did in real life, with the windows gone. The porch that had been there at one time, that was gone. But now there were doors on the house. As I walked up, the doors opened, and I stepped into the hallway. The hallway did not look like it did in real life. The floor was painted, and there was a carpet in the center. And on the east side, between the doors into the two rooms that were on the east side, there was like a table against the wall. And there was a bowl-type vase sitting on it that had lilacs painted on it. The rooms on either side of the hallway looked just the way they did in real life. Floors not right, windows gone, just barren, stripped down. At the end of the hallway, the staircase was the way it was in real life, but the railing was now back. I could see the railing. And so I walked down the hall to the stairs, put my hand on the railing, still in trance, walked up the stairs, and went to the second floor. And the hallway of the second floor looked just the way that it did in real life. Holes in the floor and all. 3 of the rooms looked just the way they did in real life as I looked in the doors. But I felt pulled to the front of the house, to the room on the southeast side. And as I stood in the doorway looking in, I saw a girl standing in the room. The windows were gone, but there were now drapes at the windows. And she was standing, holding back the curtains on one of the windows. She looked to me to be about 12 years old. She had dark hair, and she was wearing a plaid dress that was like mid-calf. It had a black sash, and she had a bow in her hair. Her hair was long, mostly down her back, but it was pulled up from the front and held in a dark-colored bow, and she was wearing what looked like white stockings and Mary Jane shoes. And as soon as I saw her, I knew that's Sarah. She's waiting for her father, and her father never comes. And then I snapped out of it. I was back at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville in that study room. And it was like, wow, she's there. I saw her. I absolutely believe that I saw Sarah standing at that window, and I knew in an instant that the reason she was there was because Rhoda would not let her leave.
Wow, she wasn't cognizant of you seeing her, right?
I don't believe so. She did not look at me. She didn't look at me at all. She showed no awareness. She was strictly looking out that window, waiting for her father to come for her.
And who was Rhoda again in relation to Sarah?
She was her mother.
Oh, okay.
Rhoda and John Galbraith were the people who built the house, and Sarah, we believe to be one of their daughters. Well, things were getting kind of dicey with investigating the house. It was not a safe site to begin with. The physical hazards in that house were pretty serious. You could hear the water sloshing around in the basement, that kind of thing, or the cellar, as it would have been at that time. It continued to be used by college students from McKendree and also high school students who were doing beer busts and stuff like that out there. we had been told by the instructor that some of the students, a couple of girls, had brought back some things that they found at the house to one of the dormitories, and paranormal activity, poltergeist activity, had started up in one of the dorms. And so they ended up bringing the stuff back, and then the activity stopped. So our interest, we were well-meaning, well-intentioned, but we were making things worse. You know, we were 22 years old. We were graduate students, which meant we're smart. We're smart. We're creative people. We can do this, and we were absolutely wrong. We did not know what we were doing. We were just going out and looking to see what we could experience. Jo became obsessed with the idea of confronting Rhoda. She said that if she could just go out to that house by herself, she could confront Rhoda and Rhoda would be gone. And the rest of us all thought that that was a very bad idea, and we were not going to enable her to do that. The very last time we went out to the house was May 13th, 1977. It just happened to be a Friday the 13th. And we were sitting outside the house on the ground talking about, what do we do? You know, what do we do with this? You know, weird stuff is happening. We used a Ouija board out in the family cemetery and got who we thought to believe to be John, the father, you know, on it. And, you know, he confirmed that he wanted to get Sarah, but he couldn't because Rhoda wouldn't let him in. She was too strong. Well, Jo and her husband owned the Ouija board, and they had it out at their house, and with the traditional college student bookcase consisting of boards and cement blocks, it was sitting on there. And one evening as they were watching television, they saw the Ouija board slide across the shelf and fall onto the floor. So it's like, this is beyond us.
Yeah.
We're not helping. We're making this worse. So we decided, you know, as we're sitting there talking about all of this, we got to give this up. And as I was sitting there on the ground in a place where there's no wiring, no electricity, nothing, all of a sudden I get a huge electrical shock. And it's like, okay, my decision is made. My decision is made. I'm never coming back here. So that night was the last time we were there. We stopped cold turkey. That Ouija board got burned. We got rid of it. And we did some other places after that, but mostly we refocused ourselves on finishing school, which we did, and then we moved on into our careers. About 10 years later, I happened to be driving through the general area of Lebanon. I was on my way to do a survey of another agency similar to my own that I was working at. And it's like, you know, I've continued to study and investigate, and I know a lot more than what I did then. I wonder if I can find the house. I had heard about 5 years earlier that the house itself had been torn down, that it was so dangerous, and teenagers in particular were taking a lot of risks out there, and the farmer didn't want to get sued. So the house was torn down, and apparently the cellar filled in. You know, so that was gone. But I thought, if I can get out to where the house used to be, I can certainly find the cemetery. And so I'm driving through the area, and all of the landmarks that we used to get out to Rhoda's house were gone. The tavern that used to be at the corner of the street we would turn on, that was gone. They had turned it into a 4-lane highway. And so it's like, I can't find it. I have no idea how to get out there. You know, I guess I can't do this. So I resigned myself to that. I felt terrible because I left a kid there. In that house of horrors, I left a kid behind. But I didn't know what else I could do. So life goes on, and I worked with Dale Kazmarek, with the Ghost Research Society for quite a while, learned a lot more from him. And then I moved out to Monmouth, Illinois, and in 1996, and I started my own team and learned more, as we specialized in our crossover work. Well, I wrote a book, Small Town Ghosts. And in 2003, I think it was, I did a presentation on some of our investigations at the annual conference. This was back when it was held at Troy's bookstore. And so while I was there, I also sold copies of my book in the back, and a guy by the name of Len Adams comes up, buys a copy of my book. Yeah, that's a familiar name.
Yeah.
He's well known now, but at the time he was a beginner. And so he and I would email back and forth, and I think I was helpful to him as he was taking his first steps into investigating the paranormal. And so he emailed me with a question of, Barb, do you think that, because I've done a lot of cemeteries, that's kind of been a specialty of mine, is doing kind of a long-term study of paranormal activity in some rural cemeteries out this way. And so he asked me in this email, when you've been out at the cemetery, have you ever gotten the feeling that maybe whatever's there is pissed off that you might be there to desecrate graves, and so it attacks you? And my response was, well, no. My experience has been that although we never want bodies to be treated disrespectfully, once the spirit has left the body, what happens to the body is not the most important thing to that spirit. What do you mean it attacked you? Well, I was out at this cemetery and I got an electrical shock. Where's this cemetery, Len? Well, it's outside of Lebanon. Len, is it associated with a story about a place called Rhoda's house? Yes, it is. More than 20 years after the last time I set foot in that cemetery, somebody who happened to buy a copy of my book and that I've been communicating with, who happened to live out in that general area, had gone to that same abandoned cemetery. There is no such thing as coincidence. There is not. This contact had to have been choreographed. And so I asked him, Len, would you do me a favor? Go out there. Do not go alone. Go in daylight. And would you take some photographs for me? In particular, look for the grave marker of a woman named Rhoda, and then look for another grave that has pipes that are set up as like a fence. Take some photos and send them to me. Sure enough, it's the same graveyard. The grave marker for Rhoda is there, far more worn. The stone, at the time that I had been able to read it, which was like 25 years earlier, I wish I had written it down, because it talked about how she used to give people advice, and it was almost like it was written sarcastically, like, this bitch is telling everybody what to do, that kind of thing. But it was so worn by this time, he couldn't read it. And so I said to Len, okay, the next time we have a conference, next year's conference, will you take me and a couple members of my team out there? I told him the whole story about Rhoda's house and what we experienced, and he promised me that he would. In the meantime, he started interviewing people in the area about the stories associated with Rhoda's house, and it really did evolve over time into something really really wild, that she had like 10 kids and she massacred all of them, and you know how those things grow on their own. And so the next year we prepared. I have a person on my team that you've met before, Amy Myers.
Mm-hmm.
She's from Quincy, and Amy is one of those people who can see dead people. She can walk into a room and say, yeah, there's 2 ghosts here, and I think that one died in the 50s, and this one over here might have died in the 1800s. She communicates with them. She picks up on stuff. And so it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to go out to the cemetery, and we're going to see what we can pick up about what's still happening there. We need to go where the house used to be. We need to go to the cemetery. We need to see if Amy can pick up on Rhoda. And if we're going to help Sarah, we got to wake her up. Sometimes when a house is destroyed, they kind of go dormant. Not necessarily leaving, but just kind of going to sleep for a while. And I said, and then after we get them woke up, we can come back in a month and do the crossover work. And so that was the plan. We get out there, we pile into Len's van, and Len does the driving, and I recognize the gravel road once we're on the gravel road. And we were going to start at the cemetery, but he drives by that, bypasses it accidentally. And so it's like, okay, keep going. And then I spot exactly where the house used to be. House is gone. It's all cornfield with the same path going down into the cornfield. And I knew it in an instant. And it's like, okay, let me out. So we stop, and I get out of the van, and I walk over towards where the house used to be. And I start yelling into the cornfield, hey, Rhoda, hey, bitch, I'm back. You remember me? I provoked. I did. I unashamed. I had like 25 years of hostility towards that woman built up.
Oh, Barb, I love this.
She had scared the bejesus out of me. Back when I was 22, well, now I was 50, and she wasn't scaring me now. And then I'm calling to Sarah. Sarah, do you remember me? Remember me? I'm Barb. Come on up. Wake up. Wake up. And so I'm stimulating everything that I can. At that point, Amy gets out of the van, and she walks up to me, and she says, Barb, I think you need to get back in the van. She's really getting angry. One of the nice things about not being nearly as sensitive as Amy is I don't feel necessarily what she feels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, I'll come in a minute. I just want to yell some more. And so I yelled some more at Rhoda and called to Sarah. And then I started feeling waves of hostility. Okay, it's time to get back in the van. So I scampered back into the van. We turned around and we went out to the cemetery. Well, it is so much more overgrown than it was all those years before. It was very difficult just getting in there with all of the overgrowth of trees and shrubs and corn and all of that. But we get back there and we start walking around. I spot Rhoda's grave right away, and we had one member who was looking for Sarah's grave, but we never did locate her grave. But it was so overgrown and uncared for and vandalized. Who knows if it was even there to be found, if there was any kind of marker to find. And, well, this is where things get a little weird. Not that this hasn't all been weird. I have a spirit guide. He is called Hawk. And I encountered him in 1998 when I was being trained as a hypnotist. Now, I had done hypnosis as a graduate student, and never did anything with it. But when I had the opportunity to go get some training in it so that I could be certified as a hypnotist, this was at a wellness center, an alternative wellness center in Macomb, Illinois. I got the training and then did an internship to follow so that I could be certified as a hypnotist. And we would do the serious stuff during the training seminars. We would do the serious stuff during the day, like habit change. And this is how you help people get over fear of spiders or whatever. We did all kinds of that serious professional stuff. And then at night we got weird. And we would do things like, this is how you read auras, and this is how you do past life regressions. And so the psychologist who was doing the training, he taught us that if you wanted to see someone's aura, you took a blank wall, you had a table with a white candle on it lit, and you had to do this in the dark, and the person whose aura you want to see, you have them stand in front of the candle far enough away that they don't set themselves on fire, but that way you get the glow of light around their body. If you can imagine that, if you can picture that in your mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people who are wanting to read the aura sit in front of that and watch the colors. And you kind of let your vision go soft and let your intuition start playing into it, and then you can start seeing colors in the person's aura. And Patrick said to me, I'm seeing a Native American in your aura. Okay. What is that? He said, I think he's your spirit guide. Well, that started me down the path of getting to know my spirit guide. And he and I, these days, have a pretty close relationship. But in those days, I was just kind of learning my way around some really weird things that we were doing. And one of the ways that he would let me know that he was near was he would pull my hair. Now, my hair was rather long at the time, and people would comment, Barb, do you realize your hair is moving? Yeah, I do. Through past life regression, I've discovered that my spirit guide was Hawk. He and I, about 1,000 years ago, were brother and sister. He was my older brother. We were Plains Indians somewhere in the Dakotas. And he had offered to be my guide through this lifetime. And so I talked to him, and I think I get a lot of the inspiration for how to do crossover work from him. He gives me hints, and he comes along on all investigations, and he is my primary protector during investigations. This is something that apparently we agreed to do before I was born in this lifetime, and he has never failed. He is a good big brother. So I'm out in these woods with the team, and we are standing there talking and trying to figure out what to do next. We're pretty sure that Rhoda's awake, and we think Sarah's awake, and then I feel my hair being pulled, and that is a signal. Hawk was letting me know that no, you're not going to come back in a month. You are not going to chicken out. After all this time, you're not going to scare yourself into not doing this. You're going to do it, and you're going to do it now. And so I told everybody, okay, we're going to do the crossover right now. Hawk is letting me know that this is the time, that Sarah's awake, Rhoda is nearby, and we got to seize the moment. And so we did. We have what we referred to as our paranormal SWAT team, which consists of guides, angels, family members, friends, those on the other side who help us when we are dealing with paranormal situations. And so I called out. Amy agreed. She said, I have a feeling Sarah's here. And I have a feeling that her father is nearby. And so we called on the paranormal SWAT team to gather around us to protect us and to keep Rhoda out. At that time, I started calling for Sarah and calling to her father to come and get Sarah, that this was a moment and they had to seize that moment. They had to do it right now because we didn't know how long we could keep Rhoda out of there. And so Amy started to describe what she was perceiving, that Sarah was present, that her father was walking in, and that her father had taken her hand, and that her father said to thank us, that he had tried to do this so many times and had never been able to do it before. And I just yelled at them, "You got to go now." And they left. Amy said, "They're gone." And as soon as they left, we could feel the paranormal SWAT team kind of dispersing, and Rhoda walking around being really, really pissed. And so we started walking out of the cemetery. Now, Amy and I stopped by Rhoda's grave, and Amy, being a much nicer person than I am, she said, you don't have to stay here. There is such a thing as forgiveness of sins and all of that. You can leave. All you have to do is want to leave, and you can leave. And then I stood there and I said, "Rhoda, I'm 50 years old. We're about the same age. You died when you were about 50 years old. What have you done in the last 100 years? You have hung around a moldy cemetery, rotting. You have tormented a child. As far as I'm concerned, you can stay here for the rest of eternity and rot. In the meantime, I've had a life, and I've learned how to do things, and you don't scare me anymore." And then it's like, oh, I better leave, because she did still actually scare me. And so we all walked out. We got back in the van and we left. Well, how do you know that a haunting is ended? You know it because the paranormal activity stops. Well, the difficulty with an abandoned cemetery is, how do you know that the activity has stopped? We went back a year later. After the conference, Len took us back out, and we went first to where the house used to be. And Amy and I and members of the team got out of the van, and we walked around, and it's like, this just feels like a cornfield. Nobody felt a thing. There was nothing there. So then we went over to where the cemetery was. And again, nothing. We felt absolutely nothing. Sometime in that year, Rhoda decided to leave. Sarah was already safe. She was safe on the other side. But Rhoda decided to leave. And so we believe that we ended that haunting. So I thought the case was closed. Well, in 2012, I get an email from a woman named Stephanie. And she apparently had been doing a Google search, trying to find out more information about the haunting at Rhoda's house, and somehow my name came up. She identified herself as a descendant of Rhoda and John Galbraith. And she said she had heard, the family tradition was that John and Rhoda had 10 kids and Rhoda killed them all. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. And we don't even know that she killed her daughter. So she said, first of all, you need to understand that the name isn't Galbraith. It's not G-A-L. It's C-A-L, Calbraith. We've been working off the tombstone that was so worn We couldn't tell that it was a C. We thought it was a G.
Mm.
We'd had the wrong name all these years. And so talk about being able to find an absolute treasure trove of information. We found a photo of Rhoda and one of her daughters, Theodosia, and we found a photo of John Galbraith, and we found in Ancestry.com the 1850 census for that area. There was a daughter by the name of Sarah. Up until that time, we had absolutely no proof of her name, of the name that I picked up on in 1977. In the 1850 census, there was a daughter named Sarah, and in the 1860 census, she was not there. She was not listed. She had died sometime in that time period. I envisioned her as being about 12 years old. According to Stephanie, Sarah had been born in 1848. The age matched up with what I saw when I was under hypnosis. We finally had proof that Sarah existed. What she died of, we don't know. We do know that there was an estrangement between Rhoda and her husband. She died about 15 years before he did, and she was buried out in that family cemetery. He died and was buried in a different cemetery. He did not remarry, so it's not that he was buried next to a new wife. Something happened that he didn't want to be buried near Rhoda. And so in 2012, we got enough information that confirmed enough of what we knew and set us on the right path to the right family. We have drawings of the farm as it was back in the day when it was a prosperous farm, drawings of the house, and pictures of the three sisters who survived. There was Theodosia and two others. But this is the investigation that set me on this path. I truly think that at the very least, at an unconscious level, I felt so guilty about leaving a child behind in that horrible situation that she was in, that I kept learning. I kept researching. I kept doing investigations. I had to get to a point where I would know what to do and where I had set up a relationship with Hawk who could guide me through what to do for the crossover, that I would write a book that would hook me up with Len, who would rediscover the location of the cemetery, and then almost 10 years after that, be contacted by a descendant of Rhoda and John, who had the correct name and finally enabled me to get some confirmation of what we had learned and what we experienced. And I feel like this is the case that brought me here. And it took 30 years, took over 30 years to do it. This is why long-term investigating is so important. You can't just go in for a single session and do a little bit of research and call it quits. You have to go back. And sometimes you have to go back 10 years later and many years later after that so that you can end a haunting. The end.
That is an amazing story, and it's really a gift. And I really mean that. That was a beautiful gift. And even though I think you had what is truly the perfect education in this field, meaning pre all the toys and gadgets, where
Yeah.
you had to use your brain more. And I'm fascinated by learning how paranormal research and paranormal investigation started, in the beginnings of it and before
Yeah.
the things we have now. But I really bet that you wish that you had ancestry.com or just even the internet back at your first visit.
Oh, heavens, yes. Heavens, yes. We could have saved a lot of time and helped Sarah a whole lot earlier if we had known more. But we were 22 years old in the day of mainframe computers and no such thing as internet. And we did the best we could, but it took a lot of evolution and technological evolving into this stuff for us to be able to do the stuff we do now. And now, at the age of 65, my goal in all of this is to teach other people how to do this. I want other people to know how to deal with a situation where there's a ghost, how to help that ghost to make a different choice and cross over. That's what I'm here for now.
And, as you were saying earlier about there are no coincidences, somehow I imagine this all lined up like it was supposed to.
It was. There is such thing as synchronicity, but there aren't coincidences, not in this. Things were set up so that I was brought where I needed to be at the time that I needed to be, when I had tools that I could use that could make a difference. I didn't have those tools in 1977. I didn't have them in 1987. But come 2003, I did. And so that was the time when everything was in place to go out there. The relationship that I have with Amy, on our team, and the team that I have where we work so well together, we did something really special. It took a long time to get there, but we did it. And then 10 years later after that, we get rewarded with information that confirms what we had experienced, mostly through intuitive sensitivity. You want a rush? That's a rush.
I bet. I would be curious to know, with your crossing over experience, most people who would be into this crossing over stuff would be more intuitive or would be the psychic person on a team, for example. But I would be curious what you thought of the show Ghost Whisperer. Were you a fan of the show Ghost Whisperer?
I watched it sometimes, but quite honestly, that was too cut and dried.
Yeah.
I was busy watching shows like The Other Side.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's where my interests were. The fictional stuff is fun and it's interesting, but I like the real thing. I'm a junkie that way. I would say right now, my favorite show is The Dead Files, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
They figure out what's going on and then figure out a way to either help it end, or they tell the people involved, this place is never going to be safe. There's too much stuff here that's bad, and living here is a bad idea. So that's the one that I go to the most often. And I've learned some things from watching them do their work. This is a time when I think that there's opportunities for people to learn how to do things so much differently than how we did them all those years ago. And I hope that I have something to contribute to that, to teaching the new generation of serious investigators what to do and how to do it, and to listen to that inner voice, that says, this is a time when you can make a difference. Paranormal social work is about establishing rapport. Say that you've got a change that you have to make. It's a change that intimidates you and you're kind of scared of it, and you're not sure if you can really do it. Who's most likely to be able to help you? Someone who comes in and threatens you, or someone who comes in like a friend and who talks to you and who wants to understand your situation and who is genuinely committed to helping you make that change. You know, hold a gun to someone's head and tell them to make a change. That change will last as long as the gun is standing at their heads. That's what an exorcism is. Exorcism is a last resort, and it's only ever used when there's a situation where harm is being caused and there's no reasoning with the ones involved. Our approach is to make repeated visits, to make contact, to be respectful, to do the research to figure out the who and the why they're there, and then help them to make a different choice than what they made at the time of death so that they can leave. The most important thing that we do, the technique that works the most, when you've got that rapport established, call on the other side to send over somebody that this person trusted in life to explain to them what's waiting for them on the other side. That technique is the one that has worked the best for us, because then a lot of the fear is gone. They've got a family member, a friend, someone that they trusted, who will take them, who will join hands with them and take them to the other side so that they can end the neurotic behavior that they're repeating by staying here. So that's what I recommend. Keep going back, talking to them, be respectful of them, certainly do the research. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of EVP sessions. You can set up some communication, and you can get ideas about who it is and why they're there. You can make a difference, but it really comes down to setting up trust and supporting them, giving them some emotional support as they make a difficult decision. Of course, you're going to run into some of them who it's like, I don't care what you have in mind, lady. I'm not leaving. This is my place.
And who are you to tell me?
Yeah, and it may very well be that this is not the time when they're going to be willing to leave. And as long as there is accommodation between the living and the dead in the house, and the family can tolerate this, a lot of times we play let's make a deal. Okay, how about you can do stuff in the family room and in the garage at night, but you stay out of the kids' bedroom. Or you can do things in the kitchen, but you're not going to go in the family room anymore. Most ghosts are adults. Most ghosts have been parents. They can understand about kids. And so you talk to them, you explain the situation to them, and this is something you don't need a psychic for. You can do it yourself. Just go from room to room, talk to them, and say, okay, I know you're here. You're doing things that are scaring the kids. I know you're here. Please stop doing things that frighten the kids. You can do stuff in the garage. You can do stuff in the family room at night, but stay out of their bedrooms and don't do things when they're around. And we have succeeded in getting ghosts to cooperate with that. So, there's a wide variety of techniques that we've used. Have you ever tried putting a ghost on a behavior program?
I bet you have.
I have, yes. Up in LeClaire, Iowa, a house that was haunted by the ghost of a young girl. And if a kid can't get attention by being good, what are they going to do? They're going to be bad, because then you can't ignore them. The family that was living in this house consisted of mother and daughter and father and son. The men didn't experience stuff with this little girl, but the mother and daughter did. The daughter in particular. When the family moved into the house, the daughter was 12. We figured the ghost of the little girl was about 9. And we think that she was attracted into a playmate because there was nothing in the history of the house or the neighborhood that explained why it was haunted. The daughter, Ashley, she saw the little girl probably about once a year. She'd have a visual encounter with her. And she was the one that the little girl spent the most time doing things in her room and to her. The two women were really afraid of this little girl. She liked to be destructive. She liked to throw things. She liked to make loud noises. She was good at slamming doors, the whole 9 yards, all kinds of bad behavior, because then they couldn't ignore her. So when I came in, it's like, okay, we got a kid situation here. Let's try a behavioral program. Let's give her attention for being good, and as best you can, ignore bad behavior. And we will reward her. What she wants most is attention from Ashley. And so every day, we have a calendar and we have sticky stars. And every day at the end of the day, Ashley is to go to her calendar, and if the little girl has been good, meaning she didn't destroy anything and she didn't scare anybody, Ashley is to praise her and give her a star on her calendar. And when we come back, if she's gotten a lot of stars on her calendar, we're going to bring her toys. And so this is a pattern we set up. The little girl's behavior kept getting better and better. And we would bring toys, brought her a Raggedy Ann doll, brought her a tea set, brought her all kinds of things that were hers. And ultimately, because we did that, and Ashley was giving her so much positive attention, the little girl finally became open to the idea of crossing over. Because of research we had done and some things that would take a long time to explain, we believed that the little girl would have been born around the same time that I was. And so toys that would have been meaningful to her would have been things like a Chatty Cathy doll. And so we asked her, did you have a Chatty Cathy or a Mrs. Beasley? Because we wanted to narrow it down. Mrs. Beasley was a toy from the late 60s. Chatty Cathy was a toy from the early 60s and late 50s. She had a Chatty Cathy doll. So now we knew what rewards would be meaningful to her. And so we built up a more positive relationship, and we finally said, okay, we're going to throw you a birthday party the next time we come. And what would you like? Well, Ashley said what she's telling me is she would like cupcakes. And she wants cupcakes with sprinkles. So we brought cupcakes with sprinkles, we brought candles, and we brought toys, presents. We were kind of hoping that when we sang her happy birthday that she would blow out the candle, but she didn't. Kids never cooperate. Anyway, we got it to the point where there was a positive relationship between this little girl and Ashley in particular. And Amy said, our psychic said, her grandparents are here. We figured it was possible that her parents were still alive. We think that the little girl, who her nickname was Little Bug, we think that's what her grandparents called her. Little Bug died of a childhood disease. It was nothing violent, but whether it was measles that turned into pneumonia or whatever, she died about the age of 8 or 9. And so we figured that her parents were still alive, but her grandparents had already crossed over. And so Amy called on the grandparents, and she said, yeah, they're here. They're here. And the grandfather is telling me that they have tried to get her before, but they could never get her attention because she was kind of having fun being a bad girl. But now she was willing to pay attention to them. And so the grandfather picked her up. Amy described this. He picked her up. She kind of tucked her head into his shoulder, and we were encouraging her, like, you can do all kinds of things with your grandparents that you can never do with us. They can take you on a picnic. You can go for a ride in their car. All the things that you have here, you'll have there. Only you're not just stuck in this house. You can go do more things. And so Amy said, they're getting ready to leave now. And so we walked them to the front door. We waved goodbye, wished her well, and Amy said they disappeared halfway down the driveway. How do you know if it worked? The paranormal activity in that house stopped after that. Stopped. No more paranormal activity. And that's the reward. You've helped a family to deal with a problem. You've helped another family to deal with their problem, their little girl who just refused to come join the family on the other side. And so you want a rush? That's a rush. That's a cause for a celebration when you have that feeling that you have helped a soul to move on.
Barb, the way you think and work is so beautiful and it's inspiring. And I assure you that you are influencing future generations of this community and paranormal investigators and social workers by, I mean, as long as you just keep telling stories. I guarantee you.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. You know, it's just by keeping a helping attitude. You know, there is a place in all of this for thrill seeking. I can understand wanting to go someplace and have that experience where, you know, you see the object move or you see the apparition or, you know, something happens that you personally experience and it sends that cold shiver down your spine. But if you want the real rush, it's when you are in service to a soul who's gone astray and you have been able to help them to think and make another choice and move on. That's it.
Man, you're good. And especially if that first story, Rhoda's house, if it is not a movie production, you know, in the next 10 years, then Hollywood's doing something wrong.
You know, since I've been retired, I have been going through things. And, you know, when you do things around the house and I can turn on the TV and the Travel Channel has got Paranormal 911 and all these shows, you know, My Haunted House, all day long.
Right.
You know, they're not the Travel Channel anymore. They're the All Weird All the Time channel. So I'm cleaning house and I've got it on in the background and I hear them talk about a house outside of Monmouth, Illinois. And I knew exactly what house they were talking about. This was a house that I'd been called in to clean up the mess that had been left by other investigators. There was a group out of I don't know if it was Peoria or Pekin, Illinois. They got invited out to do an investigation at a farmhouse outside of Monmouth. And this farmhouse had some pretty strong paranormal activity going on. And the family, you know, they were kind of tired of dealing with it. So they had decided what they were going to do is they were going to tear down that house, build a new house. Well, actually build a new house and then tear down the old one. So these folks from Pekin come in and they bring their equipment and they do their investigation and they do a little of calling things out and that kind of stuff. And then they tell the family, yeah, we got this EVP, we got this photo, you know, we've got this video that we can show you. You have a ghost. Thank you for inviting us. And then they left. The family built the new house, tore down the old house. What do you think happened with those ghosts? They moved into the new house, which was conveniently located right on the same property. And so they have a brand new house and they want to move in, but there's going to be a couple generations living in that house, including some babies. And now they're scared to death to move into the new house because the paranormal activity has just moved over from the old house. And so me and my team we went in And we dealt with this situation, and we think we pretty much got it under control. We had certainly identified what was going on. They had one of those energy rivers on their property that was attracting in every paranormal entity in the area. And them tearing down that house did not resolve any of the problems. So here on TV, there's this group that has thrill-seeking, made a mess out of somebody's life situation, and they're saying, yeah, they got their 15 minutes of fame on TV, and the family was left with a problem. This is why things have to be done differently. I have no problem with thrill-seeking. If you're going to go thrill-seeking, there are places like Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, where you can have all the thrills you can handle. Waverly Hills, go to Alcatraz. There's plenty of places to go. Don't go into someone's home, stir everything up, and then leave. I've been pissed at that team for about 5 years because of the trouble they created. So, yeah, that's where I'm coming from. Now, I have been to the Villisca Axe Murder House. It is not beneath me to every once in a while go to one of the commercial places where something really interesting might happen. But what I really do is help people with their homes and an occasional business.
I'm assuming you've had experiences where no matter what you did, you didn't feel like you had one of those crossover moments, right?
Right. A house in Burlington, Iowa, that was owned by a single mom with a 4-year-old. And there was haunting activity going on that was targeting the 4-year-old in particular. He would not sleep in his own bedroom. And long story short, we came out, we investigated. After I did the science stuff and the orientation stuff, Amy comes out and she identifies the problem as being a teenager who had lived in the neighborhood at one time, moved away, got involved in drugs and some bad stuff, probably died of an overdose, and had come back to the neighborhood and came to the house because there was a vulnerable child there that he could torment. And that's what he was doing. And it was fairly obvious that there was no rapport to be established between us and this teenager. He was out to have a good time by his definition of a good time, and he wasn't going to leave. So that was the first time that we kicked someone out of a house. We did it by doing a traditional cleansing using sage, followed by a white candle. We saged every room, invoked the presence of guides and family and friends and angels to provide protection, to sweep out the negativity, and then we put barriers up at every door as we did the cleansing. And we finally got down to the family room. This was a split-level house, and so the basement also had the family room, and we kind of felt like we had him cornered down there. And so what we did, are you familiar with energy circles?
Yes.
Yeah. What we did was including the owner of the home, we did an energy circle where we join hands, we draw energy in through the top of your head from the universe, because the universe has lots of energy to give, and send it out through your left hand into the right hand of the person next to you, and then they add their energy and send it on, and they add their energy and send it on, and you get it going in a circle. Now, as a trained hypnotist, I'm accustomed to telling people weird things while their eyes are closed and getting them to visualize it happening. And so that's what we visualize, building up energy that we keep adding to over and over and over until literally we had a tornado of energy in the center of the circle where we believed that he was cornered, and then we shot him through the roof of the house. and then did salt outside to set a barrier so that he could not come back in. The paranormal activity in that house stopped. Now, we did not kick him to the other side. We don't have the power to do that, but we kicked him out of the house. Unfortunately, I'm sure he's gone somewhere else and become someone else's problem. But we had a 4-year-old that we needed to protect.
Right.
Now, so sometimes you get what you can get, and that was a case where that's what happened.
I don't have kids, but my God, that story there is enough to keep anybody awake, let alone a parent with children. That's frightening.
Yeah. We haven't encountered that kind of thing very often. Most of the time, when the ghost has decided to stay, it's because they're just not ready to leave. They're not necessarily causing any trouble. They may be perfectly benign, in which case if the family prefers that they not leave, we're okay with that. It's a mutual choice sort of thing here. But occasionally we do have McPike Mansion. McPike Mansion is haunted by the ghost of a man who killed somebody, and he has stayed there because he thinks he's protecting his secret, that he can keep people from finding out what he did. Now, I know that the owner of McPike Mansion does not like it when we talk about that because she likes to think that everybody's very friendly there, but Henry McPike is not. We went out there a couple of times. Amy connected right away with Henry and his anger towards women, his abusiveness towards women, and she said at some point he beat a woman to death. And he thinks that by staying, he is keeping that a secret. There is no removing him. There would have to be much more of an exorcism approach, and the owner of McPike would never do that.
Is any of that documented in any way?
Well, yeah, I documented it. It is not in my book because the owner of McPike Mansion gets too angry about it. But if you're talking about is there proof that he murdered someone? No. In those days, the rule of thumb applied, that you were allowed to beat women as long as you didn't use a stick bigger than the width of your thumb. That's where that saying came from. And he was also mayor of Alton, a powerful, wealthy man, and even today, we find that men can get away. If you're wealthy and powerful enough, you can get away with things.
Of course they can.
Yeah, other people wouldn't necessarily be able to.
Wow. Well, Barb, we are definitely connecting again. I can tell you that. Because I haven't even told you that I've got some people excited about talking to you. And so in my Facebook group for the podcast, I have like 6 questions that people have for you. And we'll just have to do that in another episode, which just gives me another excuse to have you on. But I'm here to tell you that those stories are gold. These are awesome stories, and I want to thank you.
Well, and now that I am retired, I have time to write. Now, there will be a sequel to Small Town Ghosts.
Oh, good.
Which I will call Paranormal Social Work. And that's where I want to document a lot of our experiences and, offer a guide, a way for other people to learn how to do what we've done, because there's so much more of it that needs to happen.
How do people, if someone wants to get connected with you, I think we talked earlier, and I think you said Facebook is pretty much the place where people could go if they'd like to connect, right? Is that okay?
Yes. They could find me on Facebook, Barb Huyser, Huyser. And I do have email now. I have returned to the people who have email. I'm hypnobarbstg@yahoo.com. Hypnobarb STG, standing for Small Town Ghosts, at Yahoo.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for us? You've had plenty of wisdom for us this whole episode.
It has been delightful. It's been delightful to have a chance to tell my stories and to talk to you. You know, we've known each other for quite a long time and somehow just never did this. I'm glad to help. I'm glad to advise other people on things that they can try. You know, as long as they're comfortable with the notion that there's woo-woo things going on with all of this and that we can get guidance through that woo-woo stuff as to how we should handle it. You know, I'm glad to help, and I know Amy is too.
You rock. Thank you for the gift.
Oh, you're welcome. This has been fun.
Thank you to the following super Paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Justin J. Justin, James Wilfong, Bliss is my muse, David Rubenstein, Genesis, Natalie, Sonia B, Kim Robb, Jim Budd, Josiel Lorenzo, Susan Davey, Paula Mitchell, and Amy Park Gedicke. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/parlorguests, are Linda of shimmeringmoons.com, Denise Sia of Mystic Moms Paranormal, Glenna Becker, Diana Rax, Nettie, Joni Kuntz, Sylvie, Jeffrey Peck, Dina of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Peggy Hagen, Sharon, Marion Hover Clairvoyant, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lena and John of Carbon Lilies, Anna Frias, and Norman and Linda Keller. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond there's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display. Because I now have two awesome listeners who support the show at the $10 level. Steve Skinner and Jackie Pacheco. So thank you, Jackie and Steve, and thank you, Paranerds.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.